A new era for DC is here. Superman, directed by James Gunn, is not only our introduction to this version of the character, but it's also the first movie set in the DCU. A lot of people, including myself, were excited for this movie and had hoped that it would be a strong start to the movie side of the DCU. And there had also been hope that this movie would be a success, so that we could have some certainty in terms of what we could expect from DC for the next several years. I say that because it's no secret that DC has had a rocky last decade or so. So I think a fresh start for DC has been needed for a while now, and with Superman we finally have that. So, is the movie any good? This movie sees Clark Kent, also known as Superman, several years into being a hero, and despite trying to help people and do the right thing, he struggles to be seen as the good guy in everyone's eyes. This movie also sees the character go through some self-discovery as he grapples with a revelation about who he is and where he comes from. This is a great movie. This movie really got me to care about this new Superman's story, and it made an effort to make him relatable. Not only that, but it tells an engaging and hopeful story about what it means to be a hero. First, I want to talk about Superman as a character and how this movie humanizes him. In this movie, Superman gets in trouble for entering a foreign country to save lives. He wants to be a hero, but in this movie, he sees that being a hero doesn't mean you won't get into controversy, and it doesn't mean you won't make enemies. This shows the complexities that come along with being Superman. It shows that Superman isn't perfect, and he can't make everyone happy all the time because that's impossible. So this humanizes the character. We see a range of emotions from the character in this movie. There are moments where the character is happy and he's experiencing joy, but there are also moments where the character is frustrated and he loses his cool. And this all just makes him a more three-dimensional character, and it gives him more depth. In superhero movies, these heroes often have unattainable abilities and they do unbelievable things. So it's important to give the characters traits that people can identify with. And I think that's something important to do with Superman because he's the epitome of a hero. So ensuring that the audience connects with him makes us feel like we can be like him as well, at least in some ways. Also, I just want to see heroes that act like people because it just makes them more interesting. And this movie does that. It makes Superman feel like a person who just so happens to have these insane powers. This movie shows how powerful Superman can be, and he has some really cool moments. But this movie also makes it a point to show that Superman can't do everything. He gets his ass kicked in this movie. He loses fights. Superman has always been this super powerful character who can do almost anything. In this movie, he's still very strong, but not as strong as other iterations of the character. But the reason this works is because when you make Superman more mortal, and you show him get hurt, it makes the fight scenes have more weight. When we see Superman get beaten up, it's a reminder that not even he is invincible. Yet he never gives up and he never stops doing what's right. So it makes him an inspirational character, and it makes him someone that we can look up to. So I like this element of the character in this movie. Now let's talk about David Cornsweet as the character. I think he's perfect as Superman, and he really helps bring him to life. He's got a lot of charisma, and he helps make Superman believable as this symbol of hope. And he also performs well with the moments where the character is more vulnerable, angry, sad, and so on. He helps give the character depth. We don't get as much of bumbling Clark Kent as I thought we were going to get in this movie, but I don't really have a problem with that because the other aspects of the character that we see are pretty entertaining. Rachel Brosnahan is great as Lois Lane. She helps sell the smart, witty, and charismatic elements of the character. There are some funny one-liners that the character has, and Rachel Brosnahan is able to sell those moments very well. Lois and Clark have strong chemistry in this movie. They have some fun and endearing moments together, but this movie also shows that they don't fully have the same mindset on everything. But this actually makes their relationship more interesting because it shows how they contrast each other. And their relationship isn't always perfect. For example, in one of the trailers, we can see that the characters have an argument, but it helps make the relationship more three-dimensional. And because the actors have good chemistry and they're charismatic, you want to see the relationship succeed, or at least I did. Lex Luthor is this envious, despicable person in this movie, and Nicholas Hoult is great in the role. There's a moment where the character does something very heinous, and I wasn't expecting him to do it, but he does. Overall, this is a very hateable antagonist and someone who's truly the antithesis of who Superman is. But he's also fun to watch at times. He's just the right amount of a mustache-twirling villain without being too silly or hammed up. This movie was initially called Superman Legacy, and after watching it, it makes sense as to why. This movie sees the character deal with finding something out about his origin, without saying what it is. It was definitely a bold decision for James Gunn to make, but not a bad one. It makes for an interesting point of conversation in the movie. It makes Superman have to consider who he is and why he does what he does to begin with. And it also emphasizes what makes Superman a hero, so I actually like this change. There's a great deal of humor in this movie, and there are some pretty good jokes. Not every joke is hilarious, but I think the majority of the humor works. But there are also moments that are hard-hitting and have weight. Similar to the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, James Gunn is able to balance these moments and tones very well to create a cohesive and engaging movie. The CGI in this movie is good for the most part, but there's one shot that's shown in one of the trailers that doesn't look very good. It's the shot where Superman punches that guy's teeth out. It looks the same in the full movie. It doesn't look terrible, but the characters just look a bit uncanny. They kinda look like video game characters. In that one shot, the CGI kinda reminds me of The Flash, and that is not a good thing. But this is really the only shot of the movie where the CGI is noticeably questionable, so I don't really have a big issue with the CGI overall. The score is another positive for this movie, and the main theme is a new rendition of the John Williams theme from the 1978 Superman movie directed by Richard Donner. This new iteration of the theme encapsulates what makes the original great, but also it's a modern epic rendition of it. The fact that Gunn based this new theme off the John Williams one shows his appreciation for the Donner version of Superman. That, along with other elements being included in this movie, like characters including Otis, who's now Otis Berg, which is a nice reference, and Eve Tessmacher. There's also a cameo from Will Reeve, son of Christopher Reeve, as a news anchor, which is nice. It's not like James Gunn needed to include these elements or anything, but the fact that he did shows that he has an appreciation for what came before this movie and the history of Superman. And these elements also make for nice nods to people that like the Donner version of Superman. Let's talk about some of the supporting characters in the movie. I think Krypto is a great addition to the movie. He's a scruffy little misfit and he doesn't always listen. And his inclusion in the movie makes for some fun physical comedy with how reckless and hyper he can be at times. Maybe there are one or two moments where the focus is on Krypto and it could kind of feel a bit repetitive, but overall I like his inclusion in the movie. Also, giving Superman a dog makes him more relatable, because I have a dog. So me and Superman are pretty much the same. Also, it speaks to what kind of depiction of Superman this is. This is a movie that really embraces the fact that it's based on comic books. The world that's showcased in this movie is vibrant and it's fun, and it all works for me most of the time. The other heroes that show up in this movie help make this world feel like a large-scale, living DC universe. The Justice Gang is a great addition to the movie. The characters contrast Superman's personality and help illustrate how much of a Boy Scout he is. Guy Gardner, played by Nathan Fillion, is a bit of a douche and he makes for some funny moments. Hawkgirl, played by Isabella Merced, is another fun character in the movie and she provides some fun banter. But I think out of everyone in the Justice Gang, Mr. Terrific, played by Eddie Gathegi, is my favorite. He has this stoic demeanor and he provides some good comedic moments when he's paired up with other characters. And it's fun to see him use his gadgets in fight scenes. Also, I love the scenes with Ma and Pa Kent. They have a warm, wholesome vibe, and I love seeing their love for Clark. It really helps paint a picture as to how Clark grew up and why he's the kind person he is today. Also, I like what we get of Jimmy Olsen in this movie, played by Skylar Gisondo, and he has a fun subplot with Eve Tessmacher, played by Sarah Sampaio. But I would have liked it if there was more interaction with him and Clark. They seem to be buddies, so I would have liked to have more of that dynamic. For the most part, I think the supporting cast in this movie is balanced well, but I am left wanting more in some instances. I would have liked to have seen a bit more Perry White, played by Wendell Pierce, for example. Also, I think the engineer, played by Maria Gabriela de Faria, could have had some more spotlight as well. There's a bit of an arc they tease with the character, but they don't fully commit to showcasing it. I'll get more into it in the spoiler section. But this movie has a lot of good supporting characters. This movie kept me consistently entertained. I was invested in Superman's story, I really enjoyed the supporting characters, and there are a lot of elements that I mentioned that make this a really fun experience. There's one part of the movie I'm not a big fan of, where the movie maybe loses me a little. It's kinda a spoiler, so I'll get into it later. But in general, this movie doesn't have a lot of dull moments. Overall, this is a strong start to the movie side of the DCU. If this is an indicator as to what's in store for DC Studios, sign me up. Okay, let's talk about spoilers. First, I want to talk a bit more about Clark and Lois' relationship. Early on in the movie, we see Clark show up at the Daily Planet, and they portray the classic Clark Kent and Lois Lane dynamic, with Clark kinda being awkward around Lois, and Lois grilling him about his article. But flash forward to later in the movie, it's revealed that the characters have actually been dating for 3 months. Not only that, but Lois knows that Clark is Superman already. But this actually works because, similar to Superman's origin, Clark and Lois meeting for the first time, and Lois finding out that he's Superman is something that we've seen before. So skipping over that and getting right into the relationship is a nice change. Also, with Superman being 3 years into his career and so much going on around him in this movie, I think skipping over the part where they meet and Lois finds out that he's Superman was a good call. So let's talk about the part of the movie where Superman is taken to the pocket dimension. There's a part in this movie where Krypto gets kidnapped by Lex Luthor. Superman gives himself up so he could be taken to the same place where Krypto is being held. This turns out to be a pocket dimension that Lex Luthor created. We see many people imprisoned here, one of which being Metamorpho, played by Anthony Carrigan. At first he's very closed off and he's upset because his son Joey is also being imprisoned here. This immediately gives Metamorpho a heart, as we see that he has someone that he cares for. With Metamorpho depowering Superman, it leads to a pretty dark moment happening in the movie. Lex brings out Mali, the falafel vendor from earlier who helped Superman get up after he got knocked down. Lex begins to question Superman and he threatens to kill Mali if he doesn't comply. Mali tells Superman to not say anything as he doesn't have any family. This is a very dark, depressing, and selfless line from Mali. Lex asks Superman who raised him, and he obviously couldn't tell him because he would have gone and killed Ma and Pa Kent. Superman begs Lex to stop, but he shoots Mali in the head. This isn't something I was expecting. This shows what kind of cold monster Lex is. Hearing Superman let out that cry of sadness after Mali dies, it just makes the whole scene hit harder. And this scene also represents an important element of Superman's lore, which is that he can't always save everyone. This is a very strong scene. After witnessing what happens to Mali and being traumatized, Metamorpho decides to help Superman by making an artificial sun to help heal him. They break out of their cells and they rescue Joey. This leads to a sequence in the movie where the three characters plus Krypto try to escape the anti-proton river before they end up in a black hole. This is an example of James Gunn really leaning into the comic book feel of the movie. The anti-proton river is colorful, it's pixelated, and it's over the top. I don't dislike this sequence, and on second viewing, I think I like it a bit more, but there's something about it I don't love. I think it's just that the anti-proton river just doesn't really feel tangible. It feels a little too over the top. But then again, I was worried for Joey during this scene, so that's not to say that the scene is weightless. I think it's just a little too much. Like I alluded to earlier, there's a big twist in the movie that's a big change to Superman's lore. Clark finds out that his birth parents sent him to Earth to rule over humanity. And he finds this out after Lex Luthor releases the entirety of the message on live TV, and the people of Metropolis find out at the same time that Clark does. Clark sees the people of Metropolis turn on him just like that. Clark thought his purpose was to be a hero, and he really cherished the message that his birth parents sent him. So this is a big revelation to him. We see Clark deal with this throughout the movie, and he eventually addresses it in a great scene on Kent Farms with Pa Kent. Pa tells Clark something along the lines of, "I think what you wanted the message to say says a lot more about you than what it actually means." He also tells Clark that his actions and his choices make him who he is. Clark chooses to be a hero because that's who he was raised to be, and that's what he wants to do. So I actually like the change they make to Superman's lore because it emphasizes what makes him a hero. There's a great moment in the third act of the movie that's shown in the marketing, which shows the people of Jarhanpur calling out for Superman as the Bravian army is invading. And there's a powerful moment where a kid raises a Superman flag. I really like this because it shows that even with Superman's reputation damaged, the people of Jarhanpur still believe in him. In the third act, Lex opens a black hole and begins to split the city of Metropolis in half, and the citizens begin to evacuate. Superman has to stop Lex while also having to deal with Ultraman and the Engineer. The Engineer is utilized fine in the movie, but they don't really do enough with the character. You get the impression that she thinks Lex is going too far, but she doesn't really have a concrete arc. The character is supposed to lead to the Authority movie, so I think they could have done a better job at defining who this character is. But I don't have an issue with the portrayal. I think Maria Gabriela de Faria does a decent job with what she's given. Throughout the movie, Lex Luthor uses Ultraman as a henchman. We don't see his face and we don't hear his voice. But in the third act, during his fight with Superman, his mask starts to come off and we see that he's a clone of Superman. It's revealed that earlier in the movie, Lex was able to get a strand of Superman's hair. Lex couldn't physically go up against Superman himself, so controlling Ultraman like he's a character in a fighting game is what he does instead. You could say they could have had Lex figure out a way to get Superman's powers like he does in All-Star Superman, but I actually like what they do instead. It shows how having a physical clone of Superman controlled by the intellect of Lex Luthor isn't enough for Lex to prevail. With Superman getting pummeled by Ultraman, he repeats the brain beats brawn line from earlier in the movie, and it's also a nod to All-Star Superman, which is nice. This leads to him whistling, which calls Krypto over to rescue him. I like the usage of the line, but I feel like the way Superman gets out of this situation could have been written a bit better. That's because we get a lot of Krypto moments throughout the movie, so when Superman presents Krypto as this card he has up his sleeve, it doesn't have as strong of an impact. But I still like this scene because it's a good line, and I like Krypto as a character. Superman then goes to Luthor Corp to confront Lex, and he gives this monologue about how he's just as human as anyone. This monologue highlights how besides these unbelievable powers, Superman is just a regular person like the rest of us, who feels all types of emotions. He points out that his biggest strength is that he's human. I like this moment because it really illustrates how the reason Superman's able to be such a great hero is because he's really able to empathize with humanity. Is this speech a little on the nose? Sure. Do I care? Not really. I think this is a great character-defining moment. And then Lex's counter speech gets interrupted by Krypto, who goes crazy and starts attacking him. I like the comedic timing of this moment, and it's nice to see Lex get what was coming to him. After Lois and Jimmy do some investigating, they discover Lex's deal with Bravia, which involved giving them weapons at a discount in exchange of half of Jarhimpor. Lex gets exposed on live TV, and he's reduced to tears, and I'm willing to bet the whole world trashing him hurts him a lot more than the attack from Krypto possibly could, so I think this is a great moment. It's going to be interesting to see how Lex acts in his next appearance. It's going to be interesting to see how he channels this anger. After Lex Luthor is dealt with, Clark flies Lois into the air at the Daily Planet, where Lois tells him that she loves him after Clark told her that he loved her earlier in the movie. This moment works because you really care about Clark and Lois as a couple, or at least the movie made me care. They display how their relationship isn't always perfect, but despite that, they overcome their issues and they make it work because of the strong connection that they have. As someone who likes these characters and who bought into their relationship throughout the movie, this is a good moment. In terms of funny moments, I like the banter between Lois and Guy Gardner, where she makes fun of his bowl cut, and she says that it should go against his vows as a Green Lantern. And he gets all offended. Nathan Fillion is a great get if you want to have some comedy in your movie or show. I also think Jimmy Olsen and Eve Tessmacher have a fun subplot. The characters somehow having been in a relationship together, despite their wildly different personalities, makes for a funny dynamic. And it all ends up tying into the main plot of the movie, with Eve eventually leaking info about Lex Luthor's plans to Jimmy. So I think this is a good subplot. Okay, so let's talk about cameos. Peacemaker has a cameo as we see him on a talk show at one point. I've seen the Suicide Squad, but I haven't seen Peacemaker, so I don't have a big emotional attachment to the character. I don't really have anything to say other than, oh, it's cool, I like John Cena. Supergirl's cameo is much more interesting to me. She shows up towards the end of the movie, in the last scene at the Fortress of Solitude. She makes a loud entrance, crashing into something, and she walks in and immediately you can tell how different she is from Superman. She seems kinda hungover, and she actually likes how Krypto behaves, which makes sense because he's her dog and it explains his reckless behavior throughout the movie. The way she contrasts Superman is actually pretty funny, and it's perfectly illustrated by how she leaves with her yelling, "Thanks for watching him, bitch." I think Millie Alcock performs pretty well considering the type of character they're going for here. This cameo actually makes me more excited for Supergirl because we don't get a lot of comic book movies that star heroes that act like this. So it's going to be interesting to see how she grows as a character in that movie. I hear the comic that the movie is based on, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, is really good, so I'm definitely going to check that out at some point. Okay, so let's talk about the ending of the movie. I like how at the beginning of the movie, Clark watches a message from his birth parents as a way to calm him down. And at the end of the movie, he watches a bunch of videos of him and his Earth parents from when he was growing up. It's a nice full circle moment. It's a really nice moment that shows Pa and Ma Kent are the ones that made Clark who he is today. They were the ones that taught him how to be kind, and that's a lot more important than what the message from his birth parents said. This is one of my favorite parts of the movie, and it's the perfect way to end it. And the song that plays over the scene, Punk Rocker, is a great addition. It's a callback to a conversation that Clark and Lois have earlier in the movie, where Lois tells Clark that he inherently sees the good in everyone. And Clark tells her maybe that's the real punk rock. The song playing over the scene helps illustrate how Clark's parents are the ones responsible for ensuring that he sees the good in everyone. So I think this is a great way to end the movie. Let's talk about the mid-credit scene. The mid-credit scene is just a shot of Superman sitting on the moon and Krypto's hugging him. It's a nice pure moment. The post-credit scene has a fun back and forth with Superman and Mr. Terrific. Superman points out that one of the buildings is a bit off after Mr. Terrific reattached them all together. It's funny because Mr. Terrific has this kinda emotionless persona throughout the movie, but he also has moments where he gets offended over what people say and he gets emotional. I like how after that, Superman says to himself, "I can be such a jerk sometimes." The irony of maybe the nicest guy in the world saying that is funny. These scenes aren't crazy or anything, but they're nice. Would it have been nice to get a tease of things to come? Sure, but we already kinda got that with Supergirl showing up at the end of the movie. In conclusion, I think this is my favorite Superman movie. It's a love letter to the character and it perfectly encapsulates who he is and what he stands for. It doesn't shy away from more vibrant and fun elements, but the movie is also able to balance these moments very well with more dramatic moments that have more weight. The cast of characters is great, with it only being slightly overstuffed, and the characters range from being likable to funny to hateable in the case of Lex Luthor when they need to be. Overall, this is a really good time, and it's a great start to the movie side of things for the DCU. And I'm excited to see where this cinematic universe goes next. So tell me what you think of Superman in the comment section. And make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.